When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messa & Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messa & Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back, Eagles fans. You guys are locked in on Football 24/7 with John McMullen, our Eagles insider. I'm your host, Tone DeShields II. We appreciate you guys always for locking in on the content. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you guys are also subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. There you'll find amazing content like Birds 365 featuring John McMullen himself and Jody Mack. You'll find other content like the Philly Sports Power Hour with Bill Colarulo, Sports Take with Rob Ellis and Derek Gunn, the National Football Show with Dan Cilio. And again, you'll find yourself here with us here at Football 24/7 with myself and John McMullen. We appreciate you guys again. So, John, we're here. The trade deadline has officially come to a close. And let's be honest, there were so many rumors surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles about who they were going to get. We heard people talking about a running back, talking about a slot corner, talking about edge rusher, linebacker. The list goes on and on. Yet, no move was actually made in the final witching hour. So, please, John, we know we got Kevin Byard earlier in the trade, in the trade window, but no moves were made at the deadline in the final hour. Fill us in on how we got to this point, and why do you think the Philadelphia Eagles stood firm at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, these rumors, man, I understand how they get started. They generally come from the agents, so from the player side. So, and I was talking to somebody from the Eagles after the deadline, and, I mean, they laugh at some of the stuff, like there was nothing to any, I don't know, run them down again. There was certainly nothing
running back,
any
edge,
running back.
linebacker.
No, but the funniest one of all that set off laughter at the NovaCare complex was edge rusher. I mean, what, where is that coming from? You got Hassan Reddick, you got Josh Sweat, you got Brandon Graham, they need to find more reps for Nolan Smith, who they drafted in the first round. That was the one that was met with laughter. Closely followed by running back, I would say, but because I don't know where the running back stuff started from. I don't know where half this stuff comes from, but I do know actually. The Eagles famously call about everyone, and I mean that literally. So when you see, and I talk about the rumors, every single rumor in this league ends the same way. ... and the Eagles. And that's because agents can say factually correctly, oh, the Eagles called about, I'll use today as an example, Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, that was a big name that was circulating. A guy, I believe he's in the final year of his rookie deal. And he was trying to get to a new contract with the Bears. And the rumor was they kind of ran into a wall a little bit, and he became available all of a sudden. And the Eagles were one of 4 teams that potentially were trying to suit him.
Yeah, well, it was one of 4 teams that they called, but it never got anywhere serious. And as you see, he didn't even get traded. The Bills were probably the most serious, and they shifted gears and went to Rasul Douglas, ex-Eagle. I've always remembered, if you're a fan of Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, that's a classic.
I always think about the scene where he said, "Sailing is like sex to these people," and I replace sailing with draft picks to GMs. It's like sex to these people. They hold on to them like they're bars of gold. Nobody's even given up a second round pick for Jalen, which I can argue from a perspective of that's probably dumb. He's a good player. But they value these things so much. So it never got anywhere close to being done. And if you look at the entire league, the Eagles are, again, everybody forget Kevin Byard already. It's not just the last day. And obviously they sent Kentavious Street out.
Right.
And the reason they traded Kentavious Street, by the way, and one of the reasons they didn't do much else is that they have a roster crunch upcoming already. They need roster spots because Cam Jurgens is coming back probably this week. Julio Jones is got to be put on the 53 by next week after the Dallas game. Justin Evans is coming back. They expect Quez Watkins back. They got a real roster crunch already. So it's not easy to add pieces unless it's at a position where they think they need help. And look, they have the deepest roster in football. They have arguably the best roster in football. Some people might argue San Francisco, and they added Chase Young. So I know everybody wants everything. They want Chase Young. They want Montez Sweat. They want Leonard Williams. They want Ezra Cleveland. They want Donovan Peoples-Jones. They want Rasul back. I'm just going down the list of players.
Right.
Kevin Byard's pretty big. Just
very. That move seemed, you brought it up before we got started. It seems like people forgot about that move, man. The reality is that's a huge move. You brought in a former All-Pro, Pro Bowl level player in Kevin Byard, a guy who was kind of thrown into the fire pretty early, and maybe we didn't see the effects of his presence in the Washington game, but that's and
the reason why you didn't is because he's got to step in and play an entire game, 72 snaps, 5 days after he arrives. So it's going to get progressively better.
That ramp up period, so you or startup costs, as you would say.
Yeah, but there was only one 2-time All-Pro traded at the trade deadline. And the Eagles got him.
So it's fair to say
that way.
So, the whole culture around, the NFL trade deadline, and, especially the last day, right, when people are monitoring, their Twitter feed minute by minute, hour by hour. This is what the NFL wants. I mean, the NFL has created this monopoly on the sports market where they just dominate all year round. You have the schedule release, you have the combine, you have the draft, you have undrafted free agent period, you have free agency in general, you have the Super Bowl, obviously, the trade deadline, like we're discussing now. The NFL has just cultivated this year-round product, and fans are constantly just fiending for just their team to make that move. What can they do to make themselves that much better? I mean, speak on just that, the culture that the NFL has cultivated around this whole year-round thing that they do.
Yeah, I always thought they do a great job with the calendar. And from their perspective, that the league has gotten. I mean, it used to be the trade deadline. The NFL was a big zero every year, and as younger GMs got into place, they seem more willing to make some trades. But still, I mean, it's not compared to the other sports. It's pretty underwhelming. Last year, I think there were 14 trades last year, and this year, a couple players. Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Leonard Williams, Byard would be in that list. And, then it's down to unless you consider Josh Dobbs because he's a quarterback, but we all know why he was traded. Ezra Cleveland's a pretty good player. Rasul's a pretty good player. Yeah, not much. And trades are, it's harder to integrate players into an NFL system than it is for basketball or baseball. Baseball, you just show up. If you're a hitter, you hit. If you're a pitcher, you pitch, and you
Right.
fit in anywhere. Basketball, it's a lot easier. So they're becoming a little bit more open-minded, and Howie's probably more so, than anybody else. And again, he made 2 trades. Kevin Byard came in. Kentavious Street went out. Washington made 2 trades. Chase Young and Montez Sweat out. Trying to think. Minnesota made 2 trades. 3 trades if you want to go back to Cam Akers. So maybe that's the only team that made more trades, but one was out of necessity. So, I mean, the Eagles are more active than most teams, and that didn't change this year, even though a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people boil it down to one day and one afternoon. And Howie didn't do anything on this particular day, but that doesn't mean Kevin Byard doesn't count.
So, John, keeping the Kevin Byard move in mind, were there any moves that you potentially predicted on your own that the Philadelphia Eagles could make that didn't necessarily come to fruition? Like, were you surprised or were you shocked by anything they did or didn't do?
No, never. Never. I always lean towards more. And I said this morning, there's unlikely going to be a splash today. I thought maybe there'd be a minor deal. But Bradley Roby's coming back.
Right.
I think people forget that.
Yeah.
So
With this
he's gonna-
roster being hurt, it's so easy to overlook the guys that are hurt on this roster. But the
Yeah.
guys are coming back healthier. Roby, like you mentioned.
Yeah, Cam's obviously coming back. Julio's going to be on the roster. Justin Evans is going to be back. And that creates depth at safety. He was starting before he was injured. Now he'll come back as a backup. So you're better from that perspective. And I like him. Even I got the dreaded Quez Watkins mentioned today from the Eagles. So they expect Quez back as well. And they like Quez a lot more than most of the fan base. So, yeah, I mean, it's already the deepest team in football. So you can always add. And it's not like, look, if the Bears wanted to give the Eagles a Jalen Johnson for a 3rd round pick, maybe they'd listen, but it wasn't going to happen. So if something comes to fruition like that, but in the case of Johnson, there's multiple teams, and remember where the Eagles are in the standings. So when they offer a 3rd round pick, it's not as valuable as everybody else's 3rd round pick.
Exactly.
So they got to go up. And there's no way Howie's giving up a 2nd round pick. So it kind of takes care of itself.
It's kind of like the curse of the gifted, when you're so good, it kind of doesn't put you in the greatest position from a leverage perspective in terms of your negotiations because of where your draft picks don't have the same value as a Chicago Bears draft pick, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
So
mean, the Chicago Bears say, people say that's a good example. I'm glad you brought them up. And they trade for Montez Sweat. You say, well, that's a really good player? Why is Washington giving up Montez Sweat? Well,
and I was going to ask you about that. Montez and Chase. I mean, I knew they would move one of them, right? But I didn't
yeah,
think
and
they
it
would
turns out they wanted to move Chase Young because they don't like the way, there's a lot of bad stuff coming in about Chase Young out of Washington as we speak.
Really?
But yeah, and that's
Off the field, on the field,
classless.
health wise.
No, just freelancing, not doing what he's supposed to, playing for himself, that type of thing.
That seems convenient to say now.
Well, yeah, and I said it's kind of classless on his way out the door, but nonetheless, they wanted to keep Montez Sweat, but they got too big of an offer. And you say, well, they only got a second round pick, but remember, it's the Chicago Bears, so that might be the 33rd pick in the draft.
Exactly.
At worst case, 34 or 35. And so you're talking about a very, very high second round pick. There's a big difference between the Bears' second round pick and the Eagles' second round pick. A massive difference. And when you're talking about Montez Sweat getting a new contract, you're talking about over $20 million a year. So maybe they can get an edge rusher at the top of the second round who turns into a pretty good player at a much more affordable price. So that's sort of what people are doing at this time of year when they give up players like Montez Sweat.
John, swinging things back to the Philadelphia Eagles, right, and Kevin Byard, because I know that was their splash move, and post bringing him in, they made some adjustments, to his contract, which freed up, I think around 700, 800K for this season, and I know he already had an additional year left on his contract for next season. Can you walk me through how that came about and what potential impact that can have on the Philadelphia Eagles from a cap space perspective, and also Kevin Byard's future in Philadelphia, if there is one?
His future has to do with how he plays for the rest of this season. He's not coming back. He's under contract for next year, but there's no guaranteed money on this deal. So this goes both ways. He's not going to want to play on that deal.
Of course not.
And the Eagles aren't going to want to pay him that deal, So they're going to have to work something out. And typical of what happened with Slay this year. Slay was under contract, but the guaranteed money was up. So he wanted some guaranteed money. He wanted an extension. The Eagles wanted to lower the cap number, and they had some back and forth. At one point, he thought he was out the door to Baltimore, and they made up in the 23rd hour, so to speak. So
money heals all, John. Money heals all.
Yeah, but so that'll be the same thing with Byard. If he plays well, the Eagles will work out a new deal that will make it much more palatable from a salary cap standpoint, and he will get guaranteed money up front, which is what the player wants. And that's sort of how things work with veteran players. Tweaking the deal for $700,000 at this point, just getting a little bit more space. The Eagles didn't have a ton of cap space, and everything counts when you're trying to work out deals, whether it was, somebody else they were working on. You can imagine bringing in some of the players that some of the fans wanted. Well, you got to create some space to do that from a salary standpoint. But, it's just flexibility. It wasn't indicative or foreshadowing of anything. The Eagles are always looking for more flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of makes me think about that Sixers deal that kind of came across the wire early this morning. That move, obviously you didn't get too many star players in the deal, but you got yourself some flexibility. And I know we're a football show, but I had to bring that up, man, because I know you're a basketball guy as well, John.
Yeah,
And
I woke up to that Woj bomb and I said, is this,
enough said, enough said, enough said. So, again, right, you bring Kevin Byard in. You have Reed Blankenship back there, an undrafted guy, but a guy who has shown some level of promise in terms of his ability to play the position. Didn't have a good Commanders game, but overall, I think he's played much better, and I don't think that's his floor at all. You have Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Bradley Roby's going to get healthy again. I understand that this back end group is carried by the front seven or the defensive line more. So I understand that the DBs are more so carried by this D line. They go as the D line goes. I totally understand that, and it makes sense based on how they're built. But when you think about the names of Darius Slay, James Bradbury, Kevin Byard, a young up and coming guy in Reed Blankenship, Bradley Roby, a savvy veteran, so to speak, you would think from a distance, wow, the Philadelphia Eagles have a very talented group back there. They should be much better in defending the pass than they currently are. You wouldn't think a group like that would give up as many yards as they did to a guy like Sam Howell, yet they did. I want you to speak on and give me your perspective on the impact on that group as to why they haven't been able to perform up to snuff based off of, I guess, the star power, the talent that they do have back there. We know they battle injuries, and we know so many things have gone into that. I know you're not a fan of the scheme either, but you would think from a distance, a group as talented as that would be much better than what they are.
Well, they haven't been out there. I mean, that would be Roby's not even out there. Byard just showed up this week. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they haven't been out there. I would argue it's a talented outside corner tandem. But I would argue that once Avonte Maddox went down, that was a below average group from a talent standpoint. If you look at the NFL, we're talking about at that point, pick your poison with the 7 slot corners they've used, exaggerating because it started with Avonte and
below average as in the slot corner position after Avonte Maddox.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well below average, but they're well below average at safety as well. With Justin Evans and Reed Blankenship, that's below average. Now Reed is a young player who continues to improve. He had a bad game. Yeah, that's his worst game this season.
I would argue his worst game of his career. I haven't seen him play that bad.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking about an undrafted free agent.
Exactly.
I mean, there are going to be hiccups. I don't know if anybody thought it was going to be Ronnie Lott from day one. Those are, we talk about great NFL safeties. Whether you want to talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick or Derwin James or, some of the Antoine Winfield Jr., who I love as a player. Yeah, the Eagles aren't in that category. They've gotten a lot closer with Kevin Byard, but it takes time. You can just show up and step up and play. There's this defensive scheme is very relying on communication on the back end. He's been here. He's met these guys for 5 days. That'll get better. Reed, it will get better. Roby will be better than insert name, Sidney Brown, Mario Goodrich, Eli Ricks, whoever you want to throw out there. Roby will be better. So you should get better. But it's still the weakness of the team compared to the front is the back seven. It's not necessarily a bad thing because the front's really good. And we haven't even talked about the linebackers. The linebackers are just average. And, if Nakobe starts clicking, maybe that changes, but he had his worst game. So, and by the way, also give credit to Washington because that was a hell of a game plan by Eric Bieniemy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I also think Washington is just a mismatch. First of all, Darius Slay, um, based off the numbers that I have seen, he didn't have the worst game, but just historically, he doesn't really have the best track record against Terry McLaurin. The Philadelphia Eagles don't have the best track record against Terry McLaurin or just as a team, right? And I just think just the way their wide receiver room is just set up, it just seems like a mismatch, especially for a guy like James Bradbury, who didn't really have his best game either.
No, he didn't have his best game. And we talk about games having personalities too. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
Washington was coming off a bad game. Tommy Lawler brought that up this morning. They were coming off a bad game the first time they played the Eagles. So they were really locked in. They were coming off a bad game again. They were really locked in. Eagles still found a way to win.
yeah.
We talk about all these other teams. San Francisco's lost 3 in a row. A little desperation there, going out and getting Chase Young. Dallas, 2 losses. Detroit, 2 losses. Detroit got blitzed by Baltimore a couple
Yeah,
weeks
that was
ago.
rough. That was rough.
So Kansas City lost.
Everything you're saying, John, it just reaffirms the fact that this is a week-to-week league, and it doesn't matter who did what against who. They have to prove it against you that week, or you have to prove it against them that week every single time.
Too many people hang on to the week prior, and they say, "Well, you did that. Why can't?" So many times, why can't Washington do this against? Why doesn't everybody play the way Washington plays the Eagles? And I said, let's start off with Miami. You're the Miami Dolphins. You have confidence in yourself. You're not going to come in here and say, "Oh, we can't play the Eagles." You're going to try to get the football down the field to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle because you have confidence in yourself.
Right.
Half of this stuff takes care of itself. Dallas Cowboys aren't going to come in here and say, woe is me. We can't play with this team. They're going to play a different way because they have confidence in themselves. And Washington was like, we got to get the football out of our hands because we can't block it because they're not very good. And sometimes styles make bites, and the Eagles didn't adjust. And, Nick Sirianni talked about it after the game. I asked him on Monday, they did a bad job with the quick passing game. It's nothing more than that. Doesn't have to carry over. And it won't carry over. And it won't carry over I can guarantee it won't carry over for one important reason, Tone, because the Cowboys aren't going to play that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You bring up good points, John. To close out the show, man, again, I always appreciate you taking the time out for the show. Make sure you guys smash that like button and continue to stay engaged in the content. Make sure you're subscribed to JAKIB Sports and always checking out Football 24/7 with John McMullen and myself, Tone DeShields II. John, the reality is this is a big week for the Philadelphia Eagles. And, we're going to break this down, later on in the week when you and I reconnect. But the Philadelphia Eagles have an opportunity to go up 8-1. And by doing so, that drops the Cowboys to 5-3. You have an opportunity to create some real distance between yourself and the rest of your respective rivals in the NFC, and the Cowboys, and the 49ers. Speak on just how important it is for this Philadelphia Eagles team to go into the bye week with this type of momentum, having that 8-1 cushion above everyone else.
Well, the momentum is key because where the Eagles want to go. I mean, they have to keep winning to stay ahead of the teams because they want the number 1 seed. So,
Right.
And they want everything to run through Lincoln Financial Field. And to do that, obviously you have to, they've created distance against San Francisco already. They would create significant difference distance with Dallas if they're able to win the game. Detroit, I got a little concern over, as I mentioned earlier, for this reason. They play in a bad division. The only other good team just lost their starting quarterback. They still get to play Minnesota twice. with no Kirk
Mhm.
Cousins. They
And
still
their
get to
schedule is
play.
very favorable.
Yes, they still get to play Chicago twice. They still have one more with Green Bay, and I believe it's at home.
Yeah.
In other words, they're going to pile up a lot of wins, and that's why you have to keep winning. And the Eagles' schedule coming up is much more difficult. And we've been talking about this stretch, and it starts with the Cowboys. It becomes much more difficult. So they have to keep winning games. It's been 26 weeks in a row that they have had either the NFL's best record or tied for the best record. 26 regular season weeks in a row. And they got to keep it going if they want to go where they want to go.
What a time to be Eagles fans, people. You know, this is a great time in Philadelphia, man. Even though I'm trying to hold it down in Texas, but the reality is, you know, this is a great time to be an Eagles fan. Sure, the Eagles, they have their hiccups along the way, but you know, I'd much rather be 7-1 trying to figure it out rather than being 3-4. You know, trying to figure it out. So, Eagles fans, sometimes you got to take your lumps. Sometimes you got to kiss a few frogs to find your.
They should be 8-0 too.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, they really should. But sometimes there's always, you know, there's always the one that got away. You know what I mean? And that's what that that's what that Jets matchup was for the Philadelphia Eagles. So look, the team is 7-1. It's Cowboys week. It's Dallas week. This is going to be super exciting. It's going to be box office next Sunday. I'm actually surprised that this isn't a Sunday night football game, but hey, man, it's a full slate of great games. You know, this upcoming weekend, and I'm looking forward to it. John, thank you as always, man, for always providing your time, providing your insight, and always providing us with your hard work, keeping up with these wily Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles fans, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. You guys were locked in on football 24/7 with our Eagles insider, John McMullen, and I'm your guy, Tony DeShields II, and we'll see you next time.
When it comes to the fight against insurance companies, large corporations, and the healthcare industry, injured victims are always the underdog. But that doesn't worry us. At Messon Associates, we're an injury law firm from Philadelphia, and we come to fight. Our clients know that they've got representation with a chip on its shoulder, and it's the same chip that makes Philly the toughest city in the country. Call 215-568-3500 or visit us online at messalaw.com. Messon Associates, the toughest injury firm in Philadelphia.